Welcome to my video where I will discuss how I structured my finances to protect my investments against risks. This is a very important topic that I feel is not spoken about enough and is actually the most fundamental and important thing one has to do in the journey of wealth creation. Most people do make it seem as if wealth creation or wealth building is as easy as buying stocks or investments and hoping for amazing returns in the near or far future. But there are a lot of fundamentals left out that are extremely crucial to wealth building. So let me get started. As you may or may not know, wealth building has a lot to do with managing risks and probably managing growth as well. Most people will tell you about how to manage internal risks. I'll refer to the common risk that we speak about as internal risks. And to these risks, I'm referring to diversifying your funds to reduce risk, investing or not investing in certain type of stocks, or setting up a reserve fund in your account in case of a market crash or buying in the dips. This is basically managing the risk and maximizing growth potential. But then there's external risks that we hardly talk about and that's hardly mentioned. And how do you deal with these external risks? Funny enough, you probably have heard about this a lot, but you've brushed it aside and don't give it much consideration. So by external risks, we're referring to events that may happen to you or around you that will threaten your investment and your investment growth. So for me, managing my external risks was the foundation of building my wealth. And without this foundation, I basically felt as if I was building a house on a ticking time bomb. What are these risks, you may be wondering? Well, simply put, my current lifestyle, my life, the lives of my loved ones who are close to me and around me, and the well-being of my assets such as my house and my car, and probably my income as well. All of these are susceptible to external risks. So for an example, ask yourself this question, and I hope you do answer it honestly. If you were to lose your job today, whether you're retrenched or you lose your job in another way, and it's quite hard to find a job, what are the chances of you withdrawing your current investment to survive for the next 3 to 6 months? Now, after you've given that a thought, these are what I refer to as external risks that threaten your investments. So, how do we manage these external risks? You can't diversify them. So basically, we manage external risks by giving those risks to someone else for a small fee. In this case, we are referring to insurance. And these are the transferable risks that I'm referring to. There are some external risks that you cannot transfer, and I'll get to that. But in terms of transferable risks, we refer to insurance to manage those risks. So the first external risks which I covered and I managed, which is the most important and stands at the very bottom of my foundation. It's the first building block. The first external risk which I covered was my life and my wife's life. So this is what we call life insurance. And this is for the sake of reserving our assets and income. If I die, which is an absolute certainty that I will, I wouldn't want my investments, which I've worked so hard to build up, to be used to bury me. It does sound quite poetic, but I would want my family to enjoy my investments freely and in its entirety. In a similar way, if my wife dies or a family member close to me dies, I don't want to use my investments to bury them. So By transferring this risk of death to an insurance company, I know that when these tragic events of death do occur, which they will, my investments won't be involved in handling these expenses. I won't have to withdraw them to cover burial expenses or any other expenses that may come with death. This also includes replacing an income. This is an entire topic on its own, replacing an income. If you do want me to dive in, you can just ask me a question on that. So I'll give you an example. If I don't have cover for death and the funeral costs amount to 100,000 and I only have 120,000 rand invested, and that's the only money I have, chances are I'll have to withdraw that money and use that to pay off the funeral expenses. Basically meaning my wealth creation or my wealth building starts from scratch. But if I transfer that risk of having to pay that cost of 100,000 to an insurance company for a fee of around, for example, let's say it's 100 rand per month, when the death does occur, I know that I've got a contingency fund with the insurance company that is going to handle that, and I won't have to touch my investment to cover any of those expenses. So that is the first risk. The second external risk, which I covered, which is less likely to happen compared to death, but is still a risk in its own and still very possible. And I'll just group these up because there's quite a few in this category, would be your disability, severe illness, and medical aid. So for example, if I get disabled in a car accident, or I get sick with cancer or something life-threatening, or I am hospitalized due to an illness, the cost of adjusting my lifestyle or my life after these events happen can severely impact your investment if you haven't had a contingency plan, or if you haven't managed that risk properly. And this can wipe it out in a single blow and can leave you destitute. Again, if I transfer this risk to someone else or to an insurance company that we're referring to for a small fee, I know that should this event happen, I can still continue building my wealth without any interruption of the tragedy that has happened around me. So if I get disabled and I can't work anymore, if I've got a disability cover, that's going to cover my day-to-day expenses, and I can go about my wealth creation uninterrupted. The third kind of risk that you can transfer, which is less likely to occur as compared to the above two, but is still very possible, and well, it actually does occur a lot, and I know most of you would be familiar with this, is house or car insurance. So the same above applies. If a house burns down or my car is in an accident, I don't want to personally fork out the cost of repairing my car, or if I hit someone else's car, I don't want to pay or foot the bill for that car, and I don't want to use my investments to pay for that. So we transfer the risk of that tragedy to the insurance as well. You get car insurance or you get household insurance. So if you're in an accident, someone else is going to pay that fee and your investment has stayed intact. So these three are the kinds of external risks that I transferred over to a third party. So if any of those expenses, which are extremely expensive, come up, I know they'll be sorted by someone else and all my finances are still intact. And this is at a small fee. But what about external risks which are not transferable? One of these risks that you can't transfer is your retirement. According to Alexander Forbes, which is a large asset manager, only 5% of South Africans retire comfortably. This means at retirement, living with an income that will be able to properly and comfortably sustain you until you eventually die, only 5% of South Africans reach this point. Before I pursued wealth building, I had to make sure that if for some reason my wealth, which I'm building, doesn't work out, whether it's due to a hectic market crash or it's fraud in an industry or company, or whatever, and I lose the wealth that I've built up over the years. At the very least, I should know that by the time I retire, I've got enough money to live a comfortable life, and I won't have to freelance or continue working through my retirement time to survive. Interestingly enough, this is also extremely important and fundamental in starting to build what you may call generational wealth. The best gift that you can give your kids and your grandkids is not being financially dependent on them by the time you retire. Secondly, I also want to enjoy the investments that I've worked so hard to build, or the wealth that I've built over the years, and I don't want to use that as a retirement fund. I want to have a separate retirement, and the rest of the wealth I can enjoy until I die. So that is a risk that you have to work on your own before you even start pursuing wealth, is building up that retirement and making sure that by the time you retire, you will have enough money. By this, I don't mean leave investment and build up 5 million pocket first, and then after you know you've got 5 million in the bank, start investing. No, you can do it simultaneously, but you can measure how far you'll be in terms of your retirement contributions. For this, I would advise that you speak to a financial advisor who can discuss this with you. After you know that you will have a comfortable retirement with the pace or contributions you're going with, you can then look into building your wealth on the side. The last external risk management is having a readily available short-term savings. So this is basically there to handle risks hiding in the little cracks that you might have missed or that you cannot transfer, but you might need very urgently. And these, I can give you an example. Let's say if you have an emergency flight that you have to take, and the only money available to you is the money in your savings pocket, then you can access this. Or if you have a car accident and you need to pay an excess to register your claim, this comes in as well. So after you've managed these external risks, what you then have is a very strong foundation protecting your investment. So you know, if anything happens, let's say if someone dies, you know that you've got a life cover to cover that. You won't have to touch your investments. If you are disabled, you have a disability cover as well. If you're in a car accident, all of those expenses, all of those costly expenses that may come up, you have them covered, and your initial investment or your wealth pocket that you're creating on the side, planning to build over the years, is protected from any tragedy. And in my case, it will take a very big tragedy for me to have to dip into my investments to try and survive. So that is extremely fundamental when it comes to wealth building. This is not taught a lot, and it's not very understandable in the information that's given out. So I hope this does help. I'm just personally grateful for the time that I spent as a financial advisor, that I could learn all this, and I can actually practice this with an understanding of what my goal is in my current situation. This will differ per person, per budget. You have to look at your own financial situation, and I would strongly advise that you do contact a financial advisor that might help you plan this out. I'm not going to personally endorse any specific financial advisor or financial institution. I do suggest that you do your research and ask those critical questions to whoever you may encounter, to try and sort out your finances. And in the long run, this will actually help you a lot, especially when it comes to generational wealth building. If you do have any questions, I am always open, as you may know. If you have any questions, just pop me a question, or if you have any comments, I will be willing to help as far as I can. So yeah, guys, that's me. I hope this did bring a lot of insight, and I opened up a can of something you didn't know was there. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and peace.